Hello, all you beautiful viewers. Welcome back from Sad to Savage. We are going to be talking today about being comfortable with your sensuality and your sexuality. And so, let's dive right in. I think it's important that we all talk about this as a communal group of women because a lot has happened within society that dictates the way that people feel about their sensuality, about their sexuality. And my personal belief is that it's toxic, it's unhealthy to not be in tune with your sensuality and sexuality. And I am a religious, grew up in a religious household. I'm a spiritual person. And I think understanding that was a really big part of growth and learning for me. So we wanted to talk about it today just as a society, what we think the difference is between, sexuality and sensuality. And also just to kind of rift on each other and what we think that as a group that we deal with as women in this society and building confidence in our sexuality and our sensuality and what that really means. So I wanted to ask you all, I know that we have personal experiences that we've all had to grow into because we're all very different women, but do you think, and I'm just gonna shoot an age out, let's say 18, because you're supposedly an adult at 18, right? So at 18, do you feel that you were truly in tune with your sensuality and your sexuality?
Not even close.
No, not really.
Not
I was
at
still
all.
a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I feel like people expect, women, they graduate high school and there's this almost like a ticking time clock for when you can have kids, right? Like, oh, you want to have kids and you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s, like, oh, you better be careful or count your eggs. So there's almost this clock from like 18 to 29, really, which is what, not even really a decade. I mean, it is, but to grow and to become a mom, find yourself, find and figure out your sensuality and sexuality so you can be a good partner, a good spouse, but then also find it for yourself so that your confidence is in tune and intact, all while raising kids. That just seems like a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
Right?
It really
It
is.
is. It really is.
And so I just don't necessarily think that it's fair that women have this kind of imposement of, okay, you have a niche when you can have a kid, but you don't really set us up to really understand our womanhood, our sexuality, and our sensuality in this society. We're almost shamed, if she's wearing something too risque and she was sexually assaulted, it's, well, what was she wearing?
Right.
Was she drinking? Where that really shouldn't matter, because even if a woman was naked, how we should be in our natural form, if we're walking around naked, it's not our job to control the lust of other people.
Right.
It's only our job to control our intentions, and sexuality and sensuality at the root don't have to be intended to be devious or evil or sneaky or conniving. And it's almost like sexy women have this predisposition of like being slutty or being too provocative or being just because she's confident. But when you walk around with that confidence, people are less likely to fuck with you, are less likely to come and assault you, rape you, right? So I feel like women should be taught this, so that at 18 they are at least aware of, and let's start with this, the difference between sensuality and sexuality, right? So a lot of people might ask, what is the difference? So I'm just gonna go verbatim here, just so you guys can get like a kind of Webster's dictionary version. Sexuality, it includes things like physical intimacy, such as intercourse, but it also includes things like self-image, self-esteem, body image, and one's own concept of love. That's sexuality. Sensuality is relating to the body and the senses. This is different from intellect or spirit, senses meaning sensory pleasure. So whether that be physical touch, visual, the smells, which is why a lot of people will use like fruits or chocolates or champagne, because the aroma, your taste is more smell, right? So, and then all of those things are kind of sensory play, the visual of, a lot of people, why do you go to strip clubs? Men are turned on by the sensory, the visual of the senses of watching the woman dance. The physical act of sex doesn't happen at a strip club, but a lot of women will kind of question, like, why does my man want to go there? He doesn't think I'm beautiful. Maybe it's just the sense of watching someone, be sensual, be in tune with their femininity, and it really has nothing to do with sex. Maybe it does, I can't speak for men, but maybe it doesn't. And so I think that if women were in tune with that, they wouldn't feel so insecure when their man wants to go do something like that, or maybe even their man doesn't have a drive to go do certain things because they feel like those sensory pleasures are being fulfilled at home. So that's the textbook kind of definition of them. So now we'll kind of dive in. So I would love to hear someone else's opinion on what they think is the more important thing of becoming in tune with first. Sensuality or sexuality?
I think sexuality.
You think sexuality?
I think sexuality because, you know, first of all, in your 20s, like, I can only speak for myself. I didn't even really enjoy sex until my 30s. And that came with a process of learning about your body, learning about movements, even in the bed, like what movements like get your senses going. And I think sensuality kind of follows along.
Okay, that's fair enough. Because originally I would have said the opposite from you, but it does make sense in what you say of, it's not like in sex ed they teach you how to have an orgasm.
Right.
And for women it's a lot harder, right? Because it's not the visual. And so you're right, you know, maybe there are, when they separate in sex ed, you know, educating women on women can have multiple types of orgasms, and they can have prolonged orgasms, things that men cannot do. So we should have a more in-depth sexual education teaching about those aspects of our body and what we're capable of, but I digress. But yeah, even just teaching women, here's some other ways to stimulate yourself so that you can orgasm like your man, or just, and never was anyone taught anything like that.
No.
And I mean, this is multiple generations of sex ed coming out of school systems. So I agree with what you're saying. I could see that.
Yeah.
You know, that makes sense to me.
And that's how I learned it. That was my process. I mean, again, like to your point, I didn't sit there and sit like with mom over coffee, be like, Mom, how do I orgasm for like 30 seconds?
Right.
That wasn't the case.
Right.
I had to learn, like we had to learn on our own. And like, the sensuality part of it, I felt I grew into that more so in my 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then what about you two? Do you think sensuality or sexuality is more important to learn about first as a woman?
Me personally, I would say sensuality.
Okay, and why would you say sensuality?
I would say that because for me early on, I was very tapped into myself,
Okay.
and my senses were very heightened. So I learned that if I feel a certain type of way, I want to express that to my guy, because I was a late bloomer, so I didn't start having any type of sexual life until I was like early 20s. So for me, it was like I got to really know my guy. We dated. We were very innocent.
The sensory things of like
So the-
holding hands
Yes,
and
the
the
holding
touching
the hands and
and
the kissing on the forehead and on the cheek. It was just very endearing. So I got to learn that before I actually learned, you know, sex.
okay.
And then it's like we kind of grew into the sexual because we were like, what do you like? What do I like? And we kind of
The
learned
communication.
it together. So
Okay.
that was my experience. So I would say maybe if I started a little earlier, then it probably would be sexual before the sensuality part.
But you were a late bloomer, as you
Yeah,
said,
I'm a
so
late
it just
bloomer.
kind of made sense to grow into your
So
sensuality.
I kind of just grew into it. I watched all my girlfriends in college.
Like learn from them.
I did.
Hear their
I was
experiences.
like, guys, what does this mean? Because I had no clue. I did not know. And they were like, girl, let me sit you down and tell you about this. And I was like, oh my God, you should saw my face.
What's
I was
a
like
topsy-turvy
bashful. I was like, what is that? So it was a really great experience, but I did learn from my girlfriends in college.
And I think naturally I would agree with you, just instinctually, I would say that I would believe women should learn about sensuality before sexuality.
Right.
Just to be in tune with the senses and growing when you're comfortable
Mhm.
into sexuality is my first thought. But again, it makes sense. Not everyone waits forever to have sex. It does make sense to know about the sexual side of things.
I was just slow. I was a turtle.
Nothing
It's
wrong
okay.
with that. I
Right.
started super early, so nothing wrong with that.
But yeah, and what about you, Caitlin? What are you thinking?
So I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. So I was a very late bloomer as well. So I understand that. I didn't even have anything happening until like the early 20s. But I grew up dancing and like performing my whole life. So I feel like I was trained on the sensuality part of it, like the seductiveness, the movement, that kind of thing. And so then the sex part had to catch up later.
Mhm.
So I was
That makes
like
sense.
sensual before I
Knew
developed the sexuality part.
Right.
But I don't think I realized that. I think I was completely dumb to all of it, if that
Really?
makes sense. I had no idea that I was doing these things that someone would be turned on by. I had no idea.
And
Like-
it's funny that you say that because I do have, I have a similar story because I grew up dancing as well, but I was called out, like, as a young kid. I didn't know, I was on competitive cheer and dance teams, and by the time I was in high school, I was on this thing called song, so it's like half cheer, half dance team. And I remember I had this Spanish teacher in high school, my freshman year, and I had already come from the competitive world, and so I was switching, which is very like tight, rigid, gymnastics, stunts. So to go into like the high school format where it's more like palms and dancing, it was just fun for me. So I would kind of let loose and have a good time. I've always had really long hair, you know, kind of whip the hair back and forth kind of vibe. And this Spanish teacher was like, she dances too sexy, like in the middle of a pep rally.
Okay, hold on. I need to raise my hand. Because,
And I didn't even know.
but was that because you had curves?
Maybe.
I'm sorry.
I was born with hips.
I'm sorry. Growing up, because I can relate, every time
Latinas kind of get,
Yes, they got, and I come from a conservative family, and like when you like, you know, dance a little bit, right? I grew up in the 90s, so it's like booty, you know, Two Live Crew, so it's like,
Hello.
they like,
Miami.
I got chastised. I'm like, I was fully clothed though, I wasn't showing cleavage, but because my, you know,
You got
junk in my
curves.
trunk, yeah, it's like, you're getting judged. That's not cool.
It could be.
That's not fair.
And
I'm just saying.
Also, the teacher was a woman, and I found out as I got older in high school that she was also a Mormon. So in general, just the cheer outfits were offensive to her and certain things. But at that point, it was brought to my attention that the way I moved might provoke certain thoughts in men. And I had never really thought about it before. So it was made obvious to me, like my male teachers might be looking at me, or, you know, because she was so verbal in that pep rally about it. And I was just like,
Yeah, but
And you're
how
just
is that
like,
your
oh.
problem?
and my
Yeah.
coach was like, flirt, skirt, like, you know, like maybe not in front of the girls. Like I picked their outfits. They don't pick their out, you know, and I picked the dance moves. They don't pick their dance move, right?
Right.
But just the way I was doing it, I guess, made some people feel some type of way.
So they train you on the sensuality, but they don't really tell you that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you're shamed for it a little bit.
That you know that
so
part.
how are you supposed to
Because
grow as an adult into, I mean, for the longest time, they tell you, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then you turn 18 and they're like, why aren't you having sex and getting married? And it's like,
Like,
what?
which
What
one
are you
do
doing?
You want from me?
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And I do feel like it's not, I don't want to say fair, because what in this world is fair, but it's not appropriate that we continue to raise our young women a certain way and then judge them a certain way when they
Right.
become adults.
So
Great.
true.
You've got to teach them the things that are going to matter, which no one has ever asked me to name the capitals of all 50 states, ever. But when I graduated school, I was for sure asked, you know what I mean, by men, if I could like please them, if I could, right?
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, when you grow up, if I know that when I go out on a date, men have expectations of me, which no one ever was like, hey, when you date and people pay for things and they may expect you to kiss them or to fuck them or whatever. If you're gonna send them out into that world and want them to procreate in that, set them up for that.
Right.
Prepare them for
Agreed.
that.
Totally.
Instead of learning all 50 capitals, which is a vital piece of information if you're gonna be teaching, you know, geography or you're gonna be traveling. But real world stuff matters so much more. And then you leave women to be curious in their sensuality and sexuality. And then once they dive into the curiosity because they weren't taught, now they're shamed for it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I have a problem with. I'm not, you know, I had a husband 10 years. He was my first, you know, I was a virgin when I had sex with him. So I'm not on the promiscuous side of things, and I wasn't when I graduated high school. But this is just now, as a woman looking,
You
Right.
realize.
You realize.
I
Looking
100%
back.
realize
Mhm.
Yeah.
this is not right. We're not doing them justice. And then we're wondering why sexual assaults and sexual abuse continue to rise when women aren't given the knowledge to be confident and to be secure in their sensuality and sexuality
Right.
and know what's acceptable and know what is demeaning, you know, and not to them, because it's different for every woman. So at some point, I would love to talk with you all more, you know, about your personal growth stories
Right.
in sensuality and sexuality. I just thought it was important as a community of women that we all kind of open this narrative and just start to discuss it more. Doesn't mean you need to go have sex with a million people. Doesn't mean that you need to teach your daughter what a condom is at 5, right? There's a balance in everything. But if they're having boyfriends, if they're curious about things,
Talk about it.
let's
Yeah.
talk about
I
it.
think
Talk
open
about it. Just have an
conversation.
yes.
Yeah, the open
Communicate.
conversation, because I feel like growing up, my mom tried, but you're embarrassed and there aren't a lot of resources. And then you get the parents that don't want the school to talk about it
Right.
for various reasons. And it's like, at what point
It's
do girls,
counterproductive.
where do girls learn about this stuff? Now, I agree, they shouldn't necessarily be learning it super young, but when you're in high school, you're doing
You're already
things,
knowing.
like some girls are already having sex, some girls are already doing things that
and the
they don't tell their
pressure
parents.
is there. The pressure is
pressure.
there to have sex in high
Yeah.
school, for
So-
sure.
yeah.
That's all that matters,
Yeah.
whether they are or aren't. The pressure for them to do
Yeah.
it starts to
And
repeat.
there's just not enough resources for girls to understand that, you know. So I hope that as a society we start becoming a little more in tune with these things. You know, if you're going to teach girls like hip hop booty shaking in their, you know, after school class at 15, don't get mad at them for doing that, you know, and getting attention. Like, it's going to happen. So
And you
embrace
also-
it.
yeah.
Embrace
Yeah.
it. And if you okay it here, you know, be okay with it. Talk to them about it.
Yeah, and I think that goes into, you know, after school programs are right, because I didn't know the dance moves I was doing were sensual in high school, right? But some adult taught me those moves, right? We had choreographers, we had coaches, and I learned it from somewhere. So to the point of, you know, if they learn something, let's say in school, and they do it for school, and then they go and do it on their TikTok, but now you're shaming them,
Right.
that shame closes the door for the open conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, ask questions, get inside their head, you know, where did they learn it? Do they genuinely enjoy it? Because for me, I was having fun. Time of
Yeah.
my life. You could have told me that people are going to view me as sexual and I wouldn't have cared because dance is my passion. But some girls are forced to join the dance team. They're not comfortable. Maybe they don't want to do it. You know, have those conversations, and that way she knows, hey, it's for a team, it's for a performance effort, but you don't have to live your life like that. You don't need to go to the party and dance like that. You don't need to, you know what I mean? That's totally acceptable as well. But you don't know unless you start to ask open-ended questions. If you're just telling them how to live based on what you think and expect, you're going to be super disappointed, and I think we've seen that time and time again.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So, you know, sensuality and sexuality, you know, in our womanhood and how it is as a community, let's all start to, you know, ask some more open-ended questions. We would love to hear if you guys have ever had any sort of conversation, whether it be with your parents or aunts, or if you are now in a scenario where you have to have that conversation with a child or a loved one. We want to know. So definitely drop in the comments below your scenarios, you know, the questions and situations you've come up with so that we can hear more. So please stay tuned. Come back and check us out at Sad to Savage. We totally want to hear what you have to say. Like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, we really appreciate you all. Sad to Savage.